Hello, good evening, and welcome to Crossroads. I don't know why, but we are running around about 5 minutes late tonight. Apparently, I had someone on around about 6:30, called Peter Piper. He was in Coronation Street and all that lot. And the timings of the delay was a bit of a delay anyway. But we are back, and we're talking to Warren Miles. Pickup is my regular guest on a Wednesday. And we're talking, and the subject tonight is about kind of basically, being a first time parent, you know, and sometimes it can be really, really kind of like hard to be a first time parent, Warren.
Yeah, very, very challenging. You're essentially completely lost and unprepared for all the responsibility that's being dumped on you at the time.
Yeah, yeah. Sorry, my wife's just asking me if I need a drink.
No
Um,
problem.
but but the trouble is, so see, I remember when I first had my children, and my girlfriend came up to me and she said, uh, "I'm pregnant, Steve," and I was about 18 years old,
Yeah.
right? I was a youngster. I didn't really want to know. And my mum sat me down one day with her mum, and they said, "What are you going to do about it?" And I said, "Well, what can I do about it?" And next minute they says, "Well, you need to marry her or do something." So anyway, we got married. It only lasted 6 months.
Yeah.
But the trouble is, when we had the baby, it was a shock. I didn't know what to do with put I had these bottles in my hand, like formula bottles.
Yeah.
You know, all of a sudden it was like I went to the bath, and it was a shock. I landed on the floor. You know,
Yeah.
till the baby came out. Then it was like kind of like getting baby clothes and everything. And sometimes we are not prepared for what's going to happen.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Totally, totally unprepared. I mean, at 18 years old, you're barely an adult yourself, and now you're expected to care and raise another person. That's essentially almost an impossible task. I was 27 when my first one was born. So Rachel, my wife, got pregnant when we were 26, or when I was 26, and it was, even then, it was a shock to the system. I was only a few years out from university. Early in my career, financially, everything was still pretty much up in the air. Um, I had a mortgage to pay, and all of a sudden, I was bringing another human being into the world. It was a huge shock to the system. A very welcome one at the time, but I was totally unprepared. I don't know if you have them there in the UK, but we have prenatal classes. So you go to a group, like a community doctor's office, and they give you classes on kind of what to expect. Going through the birthing process, those sorts of things, the things you need to do afterwards, um, with regards to feeding and changing, and they teach you how to do diapers, that kind of stuff. But I mean, I had no idea how much, particularly the loss of sleep, was going to impact me and my ability to operate, to just be a regular human being, and giving up the freedom that you have. It's a huge change, one that's totally worth it, but a huge change nonetheless.
Yeah, yeah. It can be really, really kind of what can I say? Very difficult when you've got somebody who is kind of like, all of a sudden you've got a baby right in front of you,
Yeah.
and all of a sudden, especially when you're younger, because you're trying to deal with it, isn't you?
Yeah. Well, and you don't really have the mental maturity to deal with it properly, because you're still, when you're 18, you're only just getting out of from underneath your parents' kind of, I don't want to say grip, but from their sight. And so you're really only starting to develop your own independence. And then the second you have a child, you completely give up your independence because now it's all about that, new young being that you have to focus all of your time and energy on. It's a huge shift, which is probably why I would assume it's the same in the UK, that people are having kids later and later now. They're deferring it into their 30s and not having kids in their early 20s or late teens anymore, just because they want to establish themselves and have that independence and travel and do those sorts of things. But it's totally worth it. Like I'm making it sound like it's dire and this huge change to your life, but I like to say it's the ultimate roller coaster. It's the highest highs and the lowest lows, but it's definitely worth the ride.
What was it like when you had your girls?
Yeah. I mean, the first one, she was colicky and had a really tough time sleeping. Still does. She's 10 years old and very seldom sleeps through the entire night. So it was a huge change. But I mean, my life completely changed when I had her. It gave me a sense of purpose that I'd never had before. And I think that's really what children add to you, is they add purpose beyond just living for yourself. They give you something to strive for. You want to create a legacy. Your family name is now going to live on. Like all these kind of old-fashioned sort of things come up. I immediately turned to becoming as self-sufficient as possible. So I wanted to grow my own vegetables. I wanted to be able to get my own food through hunting and fishing, and I wanted to do everything I could to ensure that I could provide for my family no matter what happened. And so it was a big change for me, but an amazing one. And then have the second girl, and now I've got three girls, the 10, 8, and 6. And I mean, I live for them. Hence why I've got a podcast about parenting, right? Is everything I do is focused on making sure that I've got everything set up for them.
Yeah. What was it like really when you first, because you got three girls,
Yeah.
and what was it really like? Because you got all you would have had all these girls. Did you think, oh, now it might be I might have a boy in a minute, have a son or something? No, really inside you, did you think that you might have a son?
I always said to Rachel, my wife, right from the beginning, that there was no way I was ever going to have a boy, that I was only going to have girls. So I have 11 cousins and a sister, all girls. I was the only boy in the family. And so I always knew that we were genetically predisposed to having girls. In addition to that, before I met my wife, I was, let's say I earned having daughters. I was one of those boys that's the cautionary tale for fathers about keeping away from your daughters. And so I earned having the three girls and having to watch out for, the cautionary tale boys like myself. So we did hope to have a son. I would have really liked to have had a son, but I'm very happy with having three girls. And after our third daughter, my wife developed some medical issues and actually had to have a hysterectomy. So we're not able to have any more kids. We've discussed adopting a boy, but because we have so many mental health issues in our house, we're not quite sure that it's the right home to bring an adopted child into. With my oldest having ADHD and anxiety, the middle one having depression, and the third one likely having some form of obsessive compulsive disorder or something along those lines. There's a lot in our house to kind of manage as it is without going and bringing in another person. So you're asking, what was it really like? It's stressful. Yeah. It's stressful, Steve. It's really stressful being a parent because you're just, I feel like I'm a firefighter. Like I'm constantly running from from one issue to the next, whether it's fighting between the kids, a mental health issue, getting their homework done, you know, trying to make sure that they're treating my wife properly, you know, something at school. There's always something that you're having to go from place to place for, and having to deal with one issue or another. But again, I'd say it's totally worth it, because those moments where your kid comes up to you and they turn to you and say, "Dad, I love you," and your heart just melts, and you're just absolutely, you know, completely infatuated with that little person, makes it all worthwhile. And so stress is the name of the game with raising kids.
Yeah, yeah. What was it actually like to kind of like, you got all these girls and everything, and you know, when you first had your first one, what was it actually like when you're in the hospital and you're waiting for the daughter to be born and everything? And what was it actually like? What was the
Yeah,
feeling like?
so we went through, we were living in downtown Vancouver, so a very urban setting at the time, and we had to go about half an hour to get to the hospital. It was about 12 hours of labor, and when our oldest Navina was born, she was actually, there's this test they do called the APGAR test. So testing, you know, their oxygen levels and their responsiveness and that kind of stuff. And she'd had her cord wrapped around her neck while she was in labor, and so she came out and she was failing this APGAR test, the responsiveness test. And so she was rushed off to the NICU, to the neonatal intensive care unit, in order to get her kind of revived and that sort of thing. And so it was terrifying. It was an absolutely terrifying experience, having your daughter come out not being the right color, and having them rush off with her. And so I left Rachel there, you know, on the bed. She's getting stitches and everything, and I'm rushing to follow my daughter to the intensive care unit so that they can make sure that she's okay and get her fed and that sort of thing. And we wound up spending a week in the hospital with her to be there and feed her and all that sort of thing. So it was absolutely terrifying, both from the perspective of her health, but also from the perspective of knowing how much my life had changed, and now how much I was relying on this other life to sustain me, this other person to give me purpose and meaning. And so it was a change that I totally did not expect. Complete transformation of who I was as a person.
Yeah, I bet being a first-time parent sometimes can be really hard, because you know, we go through different situations in our life where, you know, things are going wrong, and
Yeah.
you know, and relationship fails a little bit.
Oh,
And
yeah.
yeah, you know, and it can be hard sometimes, can it? Really?
Yeah. That relationship piece that you just brought up, Steve, that's so key. It is so easy to put all of your energy into the child and neglect or forget about the relationship between yourself and your partner. And that, I would say, that's probably one of the biggest reasons that relationships fail in that first 6 to 12 months, is because you forget that you have to be a partnership first. Like, being a parent is incredibly important. You now have somebody who's completely reliant on you, but you can't be a good parent without focusing on your relationship with your partner. And that's something that has really come up between my wife and I, particularly in the last 6 months, with the struggles that we've had with our middle daughter and her desire to commit suicide, is that we realized that the gap in our relationship, that we weren't being partners first, was causing problems for our kids. And so, particularly after a first child, it is so important that you step up and remember to embrace your partner more than any other time, because that's such a stressful period in your life.
Yes, it is. Yeah, yeah. And the trouble is, when when the children are born and everything, and you know it can be stressful when you've got a problem where kind of like say I know someone who had triplets.
Yeah.
You
I can't even
from
imagine that. That
can you
that blows
imagine
my
that?
mind. No,
Can you
no,
imagine
not at
that?
all.
And it was chaos. It was
Yeah,
chaos. A friend of mine in Nottingham, in the UK,
yeah,
and he said, Steve, he said, I can't cope with this. He said, and they were all crying, at the
yeah.
same time, and it was, and sometimes, when we have children, and sometimes when they grow and they come into what can I say when they come into youngsters, say,
Yeah,
and that's when trouble starts,
yeah,
really, because they're into everything and anything, and you've got to watch your back.
yeah.
Um, you know, how do you with your children, kind of like control like the fighting, the insults of each other
Mhm.
when people, when they're saying, leave my toys alone, that's mine, or they're not sharing. How do you cope with that?
It is. It's a tough one, and it's one that I am constantly working on because I don't have the perfect answer because it's a struggle in our house to this very day, and it's one we talk about on the podcast constantly. Um, it- Toys like sharing for us has been one of those things where it's either share or it's gone, right? If you can't share with your sister because this is one of the most important people in your life, then maybe it's not an item you should have. And so we've removed items from situations like we built a balance beam for one of the girls, just a couple feet off the ground sort of thing, and she refused to allow her other sister to use it. And so it got removed from her room and put away until she was willing to share it. And rather than losing it again, she was willing to share with her sister. But for other things, that doesn't work at all because they want to have a sense of ownership over stuff. They want control over it, and you kind of have to embrace that. So it's it's a balancing act, and the problem is that any blanket statement I make about, well, this worked for me, guaranteed will not work for somebody else. Like you wind up having to go through and test so many different theories to find the thing that works for your kids. Um, there's a really good TED talk by a lady named Muna Unikata. Yuko Munakata, sorry. Yuko Munakata. And the TED Talk is why all parenting advice is wrong. And she goes
All right.
through and kind of talks about this meta study that they did of all the other parenting studies that are out there. And it basically shows that because of there's so many differences in our children, you can't apply blanket parenting advice to all kids. You have to, even though I've got three daughters, each one requires being parented in a completely different way because of their differences in personality. And so you
Yeah.
have to test out all these different methodologies in order to find the one that works for your kids. And so all these people that are kind of like the ivory tower of parenting advice that say this is the only way you should be doing things, no other way is going to work, that kind of stuff, it's total BS, right? It's
Yeah.
parenting is a matter of trial and error to figure out what's going to work for your kids.
Of course, we're all going to make mistakes at
Oh, definitely. I
some
mean,
point.
there's a whole reason I call myself the flawed dad, right? From the Flawed Dad's Guide to Parenting. It's because we are going to make mistakes. We're imperfect. We're imperfect as parents. You
Yes,
know,
yeah, of course.
we're imperfect as human beings. Like to err is human. So we have to expect that we're going to make mistakes with our kids, but that we're going to learn quickly on what mistakes not to make. There's a concept called failing fast, and I'd rather fail fast, learn what I need to do, and move on, rather than continuing to make the same mistakes over and over again.
That's it. And that's what I want to talk about next week, actually.
Is it?
Moving
Oh,
on.
fantastic.
Yeah, so that's what I want to talk about next week. Look, listen, thank you, Warren. As always, you're very, every week you come on here, and we really, really, really appreciate it. Us and the team, and we just class you as a team member now. And I thank you very much for coming on.
Oh, I love it, Steve. Thank you so much for having me on. I love your show. You're doing amazing things for the community and for people. I'm always happy to support. And thanks so much for everybody who's listening for checking it out and for checking out my podcast.
Thank you very much, and I'll see you again next week.
I look forward to it, Steve. Okay.
Thank you.
Bye.
Take care. Bye. There you go. Parenting can be really difficult, but at the end of the day, there's one thing we got to do is just try our best. See you later.